Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 30 of the podcast. I've had an amazing time running this podcast. The people I've spoken to and the topics we've covered have really been fantastic, and I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. I'd really appreciate it if you could do me a favor, either right now or straight after this episode. Just drop an email to will@customerswhoclick.com with any feedback you have about the podcast. Any comments about the style, the structure, the content, the guests, everything's really appreciated. But now on to today's episode. This week, I spoke with David Hoos, the marketing director at Conversmart, about how brands can make use of SMS in their customer engagement campaigns. SMS still seems to be relatively lightly used, despite being around for years. And I think one thing that puts marketers off is probably the low character count. And, it makes for a pretty blunt message at times. And those marketers, like the rest of us, don't like being bombarded with SMS promotions. But there are ways to do it properly. And that's why I invited David to chat with me. Hi, David. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you could tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and why you do it.
So I'm the marketing director at Conversmart, and we're an SMS and email marketing agency specifically for D2C and e-commerce brands. And what I generally do on a regular basis is I'm just trying to educate and kind of equip our e-commerce audience about how to think about SMS and email for their businesses. I say Conversmart. So emphasis on the smart part, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, I've been there since I think it's been June. So a few months now. It's been kind of like drinking from a fire hose, lots of learning very quickly. But it's a really interesting space. It's kind of a new technology. The thing that's nice about it is that I think a lot of people innately understand what it is we do. But it's interesting, too, that people have very strong opinions one way or the other about, basically their preconceptions that they're bringing about it. And so there's a little bit of education on our part, but also a little bit of re-education as well.
So let's kind of dive into a bit of the SMS side of things, really. It'd be good to get your kind of thoughts on maybe how it's changed over the last few years, if it has, kind of how it fits into the automation mix, and just, I guess, generally how brands should be using it, and what consumers want as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there is that I think it's getting a lot more attention nowadays because it's become, messaging in general has become more central to our daily activities. We're carrying our smartphones around with us almost all the time. And I think it's where we're doing, sometimes we're watching movies on it. Sometimes we're talking to friends over the phone or texting them. It's a hub that we're all carrying around with us. And so if you're wanting to market to your audience, there's really not a more direct way to do it than to contact them on their mobile phones.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I've used SMS marketing before. I've used it a little bit for kind of transactional stuff, but mainly for marketing messages. And it's a channel that's worked really, really well for us. Or for the companies that I've done it with, but there's always kind of that concern that maybe it's a bit too intrusive. When companies that deal with SMS marketing talk about it, they say open rates are 90% plus. Click-through rates tend to be like 40, 50%, stuff like that. So that the response rate can be really great, but I think tied to that is probably the concern that part of the open is because it pops up on your phone and it's an SMS and you're just going to open it really quickly, kind of like naturally. So are you likely to kind of piss off people by just not even hammering with them with marketing messages, but even if it was a weekly or fortnightly message, if it's just a marketing message, are people going to go, well, no, this is just annoying me because it keeps buzzing my phone. I keep opening it and I'm not interested.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We actually did a research report recently, and one of the questions in there was kind of about the sentiment that people were having about the messages that they were getting. And we split that up across different age demographics because we just wanted to see if the numbers changed dramatically across different age ranges. And the thing that was interesting was that the younger you were, the more indifferent you were to the messages coming in, and then the older you were, the more that kind of increased a little bit. But honestly, almost all of it was right in the middle. So people were kind of like, well, I'm don't really have a strong opinion either way about getting messages. But as you got older, they were a little bit more bothered by the messaging coming in. So I think the lesson in there is, regardless of what age range that you're messaging to, just being really considerate of your audience, and making sure that what you're sending them is relevant, that it's appropriate, that it's and it's not too often. Like, just think about how often you would want to get SMS messages, and act accordingly. So I think a good place to start is with some of the automated stuff around your shipping information and that sort of stuff. But I think also you can use it as a great tool to tell people more about your brand in a way that's not obnoxious, and not always be trying to just say shop now, shop now, shop now. I think you can use it in some pretty creative ways to really build your brand over the long term.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you mentioned the transactional stuff around shipping and things. That's really important. I think consumers really like that because, it's useful information. It's keeping them informed about their order. But yeah, you shouldn't just sell. And I think that's possibly why SMS isn't used as much as other channels. It's you have a much smaller amount of space, and so it's harder to put a kind of more content and information led marketing message. And so if you can't fit that in there, I think people feel their only option is to sell. And therefore, if they're looking at the channels and thinking, well, are people going to get annoyed if I send them a salesy message every week? I'll stop doing it. Mm-hmm. Or potentially not even bring it in the first place. There's still loads of companies that don't use it. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day about it in preparation for this podcast, and I said, I think the only marketing messages I get right now via SMS are for pizza brands and gambling. That's it.
Yeah. Honestly, before I started, I hadn't signed up at a D2C brand before. I was signed up for my dentist. So my dentist would text me every once in a while whenever I needed a cleaning or something like that, which actually was kind of nice and convenient. But I think it's those sorts of things where it's actually keeping in mind and like staying very personalized, that it's that sort of stuff that does well. It's the stuff where people, are kind of, they have a big list and they're just going to blast the same message out to everyone. That I think that both on the sender side, I don't think it performs as well, but then also on the recipient side, it just doesn't, it just leaves a bad taste in their mouth. So and I think it's some of those sort of spammy practices that have, I think it's made a lot of marketers who are on the fence about it more worried about the channel. But I think basically it's a channel that can be done well or done poorly, as plenty of other channels can be. And so I think it's just important to educate people on what are the ways to do it well and discourage the ways to do it poorly.
Yeah, I do. I wonder if it's, I guess, like one of those channels where if brands do get it wrong, does it annoy consumers more than other channels? So if someone, if I'm selling really salesy led emails, for example, and another brand is sending really salesy SMS messages, does that channel done badly, piss off people more than other channels?
Like, does it reflect on other brands that maybe are doing it well? Is that what you're asking?
No, just I guess more, if you were going to do a channel badly, don't do SMS badly, because you're more likely to annoy people. I guess that's kind of what I'm asking.
Oh yeah.
Is it a channel which do people get more bothered by it quicker?
I could see that definitely. I think honestly, but like I was saying earlier, I think it's the older the demographic, the more that's the case. I think because the younger audience, I think, is living in their messages so frequently, they're getting messages from all over the place. They're getting it from, maybe pizza and gambling sites, from, a bunch of their friends. And I think they live in their messaging apps a lot more than the older generations do. And so I think it bothers them to a lesser degree. But I don't think that's an excuse really for brands to abuse it. I think it's just more of an opportunity to stand out. If you're doing SMS, to stand out from the other people who are maybe abusing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to clarify, when you say SMS, are we talking like text message, like traditional text message SMS, or would you include maybe WhatsApp in there?
I think when I talk about kind of messaging in general, you could include WhatsApp, but I think when I'm referring to SMS, I'm mainly referring to traditional like mobile phone SMS.
Yeah. Do you think there are any kind of common myths or misconceptions that marketers might have around SMS? I suppose we probably touched on one or two.
Yeah, I think so. I think probably just the adoption around it. At least one of the things that I learned recently when we were doing this research is I just asked, of people who have shopped online in the last year, how many of you have signed up for SMS? And over 75% said that they had signed up, which I thought it would be lower than that, but that was a really interesting number to me. So I think for all the people out there who are thinking, okay, people, this is still a very new channel and, it's still a while before it catches on. I think the reality is consumers are already comfortable with it. I think part of that is because, political campaigns are using SMS a lot more. And so, people are getting used to stuff in their text message inbox from that. People are doing things like two-factor authentication with different apps and whatnot that use text message to send them some sort of, login code. And just, other things like I was mentioning earlier, like a dentist appointment. Some service businesses are using them for those sorts of uses. And I think it's really getting consumers much more comfortable with the channel. And so I think now more than ever, it's actually a really great time to get into it and hopefully do it well.
Yeah. I do think like for kind of almost like service level messaging, which for me would include things like it's been 6 months since you last came to the dentist, so you might want to consider book an appointment. I wouldn't really consider that a marketing message because that's kind of the standard timeframes for it. They're just kind of reminding you that it's something you really need to do. I remember actually when I worked for a gaming company, it was when GDPR came out, which was not very fun. We started because as part of GDPR, you have to have a specific opt-in, and you are supposed to have a specific opt-in for each channel, or at least that's the way our compliance team viewed it. And so we had to change our sign-up form and have email, SMS, and phone call as separate opt-ins. And SMS was lower, quite a bit lower. I think about 65% opted into email, maybe about 25% into SMS. So the opt-in rates were a lot lower, but that's when we gave them the options. So, but most people opted into at least one channel.
Yeah.
And I do think, if you take that approach through GDPR, it is going to be more difficult because you have to ask people for each different channel. But you can incentivize it as well. You are allowed to use reasonable degrees of incentivization to get people opted into each channel. So I think that's definitely worth looking into because it's a super engaged marketing channel. So if it costs you, I don't know, £5 credit or a 10% discount code to get someone to sign up for SMS, I do think it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, especially because it's a channel that you can message to repeatedly. That's one thing that we really focus on is that it's an owned channel. So similar to email, once you add people to the list, there are people that you can go back to and say, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Here's a discount and here's, a link to our store. Or, we know that you purchased this other item a while back. Here's an item in a different color, or here's something that goes well with that prior item. So there's a lot of different things you can do in that vein.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, it's an own channel, and it's so important to build up those channels, because you just can't afford to pay. Well, I mean, some brands can, but you don't want to have to pay Facebook or Google every time you want to bring someone back.
Yeah, exactly.
Or just rely on them doing it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone wanted to get started with SMS themselves, what are some of the important things they need to think about?
Honestly, I would say think of it a little bit like email. While it's not the exact same, in email you'll do automations. So like for an e-commerce brand, you might have some cart abandonment emails. You might have some like a welcome series to get people familiar with your brand when they first sign up. So there's a variety of automations that you'll have set up. And then you'd also have your kind of ongoing campaigns. And I think starting with that sort of frame of reference, so setting up some automations that maybe mirror some of your email automations, and then I'm honestly doing some side-by-side, sending messages on text that you would also send via email, but just abbreviated a little bit more. And then as far as, I guess, some more practical ways that you can get started, our CEO, Ari, just published a course on Shopify Compass on getting started with it. So it's a great kind of primer on how to really kind of practically get started, all step by step.
Is that available on your website, or?
If you just go to shopifycompass.com, it's a website run by Shopify, and they have a whole bunch of different courses for people who are just getting started. And that's one of the most recent ones that they just launched up there. So
Okay, cool.
Find it pretty easily. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds pretty cool. What else? I guess, you said it's good to start with email as a reference. What differences do people need to consider, I guess, is the next question. Obviously, you've got less or fewer characters to use. But yeah, so what are maybe some other things people need to consider if they want to use SMS?
Yeah, I think honestly, the biggest factors, I think, in the success of your SMS messaging is basically how effective you are at getting your audience's attention. And so I think some of the ways that you do that are with stronger copywriting. There's also MMSs, which are basically an SMS with a little image attached. And so one of the things that we do with our clients is we tend to do little animated GIFs that are very engaging. And I think that's when I look at some text message campaigns from big brands that aren't working with us, and then some of our clients, it's pretty night and day. In fact, I my wife signed up for some I think some cosmetic SMS messages, and it was night and day between what this big brand was doing and what our client was doing that we had set up with them. And she's like, if I was into the product that your client's selling, I would have already bought already, because your guys' messages are just that much more engaging than the one that she was getting from this big brand. So I think copywriting is hugely important, having good designs for those MMS messages, and then just being really smart about your segmentation. So not everyone on your list should get every message that you're sending out. So there's going to be people who are engaged, people who are not engaged, people who've purchased before. There's going to be people who've purchased specific products before. And so having a really strong way to be tagging people who, based on their behavior, so that you can segment those people later on. And I think you're just going to see much better results. You're going to see far fewer unsubscribes, which, if you're going to the effort of adding people to your SMS list, it's important to, really make an effort to reduce your unsubscribes. I think that's something that is missed an awful lot. So I'm trying to think of what else I mean, it is going to be different than email in that you really have a limited space to say what you're going to say. But I think one of the things you can do, and it's something we do with clients, is if it's something that needs kind of a longer treatment, whether it's, a sizing guide or customer service related stuff, you can create a page that goes into much more depth on your site, and then you can just have a really quick answer under that 160 character limit on your message, and then have it link back to your site. So you're not only answering something quickly, you're also giving them additional resources, and those additional resources are on your site. So if they make it over to your site and they get their answer, they're already there, and they could potentially continue browsing and, potentially purchase as well. So there's kind of a win-win there. You're both helping them with their question, but also getting them closer to a purchase by bringing them back to your site.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's obviously important to get people back to the site. But yeah, I think probably one thing people miss is the SMS doesn't have to be the complete message. You can almost tease it. But I guess in the example you gave, it's not really a teaser. It's here's the quick answer. If you want the detailed answer, go to the website, where we will then try and funnel you more towards the products and sales, which I think is perfectly fine.
I think if you're on Twitter or something like that, that's actually kind of a good training ground, because you have that character limit to work within. You figure out how to say, pack more words or more meaning into fewer words.
Yeah, absolutely. Although you do see a lot of brands on Twitter, as soon as someone tweets them with a question or an issue or whatever, the response is just, "Can you DM us, please?"
Yeah,
which
sure.
I guess kind of makes sense if they have to go into personal details and things to go into the issue. But sometimes, I've had some conversations about reviews and social proof, and keeping stuff out in the open does really help. Back at my parents' in Kent, the Wi-Fi hasn't been great through lockdown, and the company that provides it has been quite well known over probably this year actually for being quite unreliable. And you see so many complaints on Twitter, people asking, what's going on? Why is the internet down again? Blah blah blah. And literally just every response is just, "Can you DM us?" There's not even an attempt to be kind of open or just give an answer that everyone can look at. But I guess that's a bit off topic. What are some of the mistakes people make then with SMS?
Yeah, I mean, I think I hit on some of this earlier on, but I think it's the mindset where it's a channel to market at your audience rather than interact with your audience. So the more you can think of it as, I mean, the way that a lot of people use SMS is for messaging. So, if you had a friend who all they did was text message you, but they never replied, or you never sent anything back to them, it wasn't a conversation, I think you'd probably be kind of annoyed at that friend too. And so in the same way, you want to make it a channel where your words are very down to earth, that it is very conversational, that you're providing value, and that you're leaving it open to replies and questions. That's actually one other thing that I think is a great benefit of it is, unlike email, people don't often reply back, mainly because a lot of times these messages are coming from more of a no reply at email address from a lot of brands. But I think the great thing about SMS is people can say, "Oh, speaking of this message, can you tell me where my order is at?" And on the other end, they can look it up and send them their information. And it's just a great way to provide a better customer experience overall, and make another loyal customer out of that person.
But that's the kind of the setup for the responses has to be in place, doesn't it? I'm guessing do you have a phone number and can you link it to your customer support tool or something, or how would that work? Because I've never actually dealt with that. I don't think I've ever seen someone respond to a message we sent out.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we've approached it. So, since we're an agency, it's a little bit of an interesting thing. Some of our clients want us to manage it for them, and some of them don't, which I totally understand. And so, with the folks that don't want us to manage it, we can set it up to go through to their platform for doing customer support. So that might be Gorgeous or some other platform. And then for the folks that do let us manage it, what we'll typically do is we'll look at prior responses and see what sort of general buckets that those replies fall under. So a lot of times it can be, can you send me the tracking information again? Or, what does the sizing for this look like? That sort of thing. And for a lot of those buckets of questions, there's already an answer on the website. So going back to one of my previous answers, I think what we'll do is we'll come up with a short, concise answer that acknowledges their question and says, and here's a place to go with more information that'll help answer your question, and then have it go back to their website. So we're really not, writing completely new text messages back to consumers on their behalf. We're scripting out good messaging that is approved by the client, and then we use that whenever we get a message that comes in. And then if there is some sort of question that's outside of that, list of bucketed questions, we'll go ahead and pass it off to their internal support. And that might be, part of a new set of questions that will, create a new kind of predetermined answer for going forward.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So do you use that, do you kind of use that those responses as feedback as well? So would you then take those responses and think, well, that's the response to this email campaign. I don't know. Let's say you got a number of responses on the similar lines to an SMS campaign. So you'd say, well, next time we need to make sure we don't leave that ambiguous, or we address that issue.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's important. I think across all the SMS messaging is paying close attention to your data and what what's working and what's not working, and adapting after each campaign based off of that. So if you see something, for example, that this message had a higher unsubscribe rate, or we got this question a bunch after this particular campaign, now we know how to fine tune it a little bit more for the next round. So yeah, I think testing and learning is a huge foundation point for SMS. And I mean, I think that's true in email as well, but I think it bears repeating.
Yeah, it's probably one of those other things that puts people off a little bit. Maybe they're not sure how to test SMS, because I guess it's not quite as simple. I wouldn't have thought. I mean, I know you can write slightly different copy and things, but although I suppose we did it, didn't we, at the gambling company?
I mean, I think it's a little bit easier with your automations, but it would be a little more difficult from campaign to campaign. But I think I think honestly, it's more of a test and learn sort of testing. It's not going to be as much A/B like side by side testing, but I think you can still have interesting takeaways and things that you can implement for future campaigns that you can learn each time.
Yeah, I suppose maybe the thing about A/B testing with SMS is because it's just 160 characters of copy, including a link. Maybe people feel there's not really that much to test, so why bother? But I think you can. It's not the same as testing a subject line, which might be a small tweak to see if a slightly different format works. You could go with a very different message.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Cool. So, any other big mistakes do you think people make?
I'd have to think. I touched on personalization and segmentation. I think that's hugely important. Customer centricity is hugely important. Honestly, just if the more you are keeping your customer and their journey and their preferences in mind as you do SMS, the better results you're going to see in the long run. So I know, I think there's probably so many different ways that you could approach it. And I think multiple ways might work. But the bottom line is it needs to be focused on what your consumers want to get in their inbox, not what you want to send them.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose in a way it's just the same as almost any other channel in that regard, isn't it? You need to be thinking about what the customers really want and giving them the best possible experience. Answering their questions or explaining the benefits of a product and how they will benefit from it. Yeah, and not just pushing your sales messages again and again and just hoping eventually someone decides to click them and can purchase.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a marketing truism that, the more you bombard people and market at them, the more disinterested they're going to get over time. And the more you're actually considering them and listening and sending them things that are appropriate, the more you're going to succeed long term. So it's, I think there's kind of two camps within marketing that, want to do one way or the other. And so that's, I think you can fail or succeed with most channels, and based off of that sort of divide. Yeah,
absolutely. Do you know of any big trends coming up with SMS over the next, I don't know, could be a year, could be 2 years?
Not at this point. I'm interested to see one of the things we've just basically learned about just recently is that there, because of all the political campaign stuff going on right now here in the U.S., there's a lot of people sending, a lot of campaigns that are sending MMS messages. And so that's affecting some of the sendability and the deliverability with carriers. So we're having to kind of adapt to maybe doing less multimedia messages and just focusing on the text-only ones. So I guess that's not so much like a big trend, like a multi-year trend, but it is something to keep in mind that, when there are going to be unusually high volumes of messages being sent, that it can affect the deliverability. But I feel like that's more the exception than the rule.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've had that before when we sent, again, the gaming company, because we had millions on the database across, the lead segment, the active players, the people who were potentially stopping their play. And it just meant every now and again there'd be one Friday in a month where all these different segments would be contacted at the same time, different messages and things. But all those campaigns would go out at the same time. And we had a little unfortunate incident because it meant that some of our SMS sends were going out at like 11, 12, 1 a.m. Just because they'd been delayed. Yeah. So even though we'd sent them at maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the backlog that we'd accidentally created, delayed loads of messages. So yeah, it's just something to consider, isn't it? If you're sending a lot of messages and you think it's kind of prime time for other businesses, think things might just slow down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that makes a good case too for, careful segmentation. If you can just be messaging particular segments, you can reduce the overall amount that you're sending out, which might help with, you're not going to be overloading things as much.
Yeah, it just meant we had to work between the teams and arrange different timings and things, because it was different messaging, different promotions, different segments, and all that. It just happened to be all at the same time because these different teams just ran their campaigns at the same time.
Yeah, a perfect storm, sort of.
Yeah, I think it might have been a Friday before a bank holiday, or it was a payday or something like that. One of the prime times to run a campaign, and so obviously all the different teams wanted it.
Oh no.
So do you have any pet peeves yourself when it comes to marketing?
Honestly, I think, I've mentioned this throughout, but I think just not being customer centric. I think when you start losing sight of the customer, you end up thinking of them kind of as more as something to plunder, or to mine to make money for yourself. But I think the real value in doing marketing well is thinking of it. How can you help others, with something of value, and they're exchanging something of value in return, and it's more of a win-win rather than a win-lose situation. So I think, and just think too, the more you are, more you become disconnected from actually talking to customers, the poorer your marketing gets. You start marketing to your idea of your customer rather than your actual customer. And I think that ends up in marketing that doesn't resonate as strongly. So that's why I'm kind of always an advocate of strong customer-centric relationships that inform all your marketing.
Yeah, there's the risk that maybe over time, I don't know, maybe if people are just doing the same role, the same thing again and again, it gets to that point where you're thinking, right, now for this campaign, we've got a list of 100,000 people. If we get our normal open rate of this and a click-through rate of that and our conversion rate and average order value, we're going to earn this amount of money. Let's run the campaign and let's put the products that we want to sell on there. And that's kind of, it's kind of that, leading with that approach rather than thinking, right, we've got this segment of people who have, it might be this problem or they buy this sort of product. How can we kind of craft this email and this content, or SMS? Should focus on the SMS, into a message which actually resonates with them and makes them think, oh yeah, actually that's something I want. And I think probably what you tend to get is when marketers view that list as just a number, a number, we've got 100,000 people on this list. That's where you probably get more sales-led messages, more promotions as well.
Yep, absolutely. If you think about it as people that you're sending to, that kind of changes the mindset a little bit, and it changes, I think, how you market to them. Definitely.
Yeah, because if you think about the person, and it's not exactly the individual, but when you break it down into those segments, you come up with a reason for messaging them. You don't need to send them, or you don't necessarily need to send them a 20% discount to get that purchase. But if you don't think about those segments and the people, that's when the only way you're going to get sales is by putting a few products in front of them and a discount and saying, please buy.
Yep.
Hopefully a different answer, although I can see why it'd be the same. Do you feel there's any particular aspect of marketing at the moment which is quite underrated? Or it can be a channel or tactic as well, actually?
I mean, I'm becoming more and more of a proponent of understanding good storytelling. I think I think people are starting to recognize more and more its importance. Maybe part of that is, people realizing that Netflix is getting, far more of our attention than a lot of marketing messages. So, maybe there's something to storytelling and entertainment that we could be learning in marketing. So, and I think a lot of that, can tie into how you're writing case studies, how you're writing content on your website to attract people, how you're talking about your products and where they fit into people's lives. So I think a good understanding of storytelling is something maybe that people would do well to kind of study up more on.
Yeah, I do think, from what I've seen, I suppose it's on LinkedIn, so it is mainly B2B. I feel like storytelling is something that is being used more B2B these days. And it's picking up, it's getting a lot more traction, but I don't see anything from B2C brands on that really. Most of the emails I get are still, here are some products we'd like you to buy. Yeah, sometimes it's here are the products we think you'll like. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the storytelling is, from what I see, is mainly B2B, which is great, but hopefully, it will feed into B2C.
Yeah, I think it's a missed opportunity. I think some of the brands that have a really strong brand story. I don't know, brands like Tom's and their 1-for-1 deal. And basically, a lot of these brands that can kind of craft a narrative around why they do what they do. I think it ends up showing people more of the value in their product, and not just, it trains consumers to not just think of it as a commodity that they're selling, but as something that has value beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I was just going to say, like brand values really come into it. I think you can really tell when a brand actually cares about being sustainable, or and being environmentally friendly, or if they're just sticking a badge up on their site and saying our products are more sustainable than they were.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Cool. Well, David, this has been absolutely fantastic. I think SMS is a channel which, it's been around for so long, but it's still it just doesn't feel like it's ever really picked up very well with marketers. So this has been really great. How can people get in touch if they want to find out more?
Yeah. So if you want to find out more about Conversmart, that's just conversmart.com. And if you want to follow kind of what I'm up to online, you can do that on Twitter. I'm at David Hoos. Last name is spelled Hoos. Don't know why it's pronounced that way, but that's just what my parents told me. So, but yeah, so those are the two places I think they're probably the best.
Cool. Perfect. All right. Cheers, David.
Thank you.
So you heard it. SMS is a great way to engage with your customers, driving retention and revenue for your business. Like with most other channels, really, you've just got to do it right. Be customer centric with your approach and your strategy. If you send a promo message every few days, you're going to annoy people. If you don't segment and personalize the message in some way, you're going to annoy people. And if the messages are just boring, you'll annoy people. Get customers used to your SMS messages with more transactional messages, those related to orders of their account, then feeding those promotional messages over time. The most important thing really is to get that list built. Even if you don't really have the time and resource to build out a strategy and really use the channel, at least you have the database ready and you can activate it at the right time, which, as you've just heard in the podcast, the right time is right now. Just get started with it. You can build it into your automated flows. You can send, ad hoc campaigns. If you're maybe a smaller brand, you don't have to have it built into your entire, marketing automation system. Just pull out the SMS data separately, plug it into one of these tools you get online, and just get those SMSs sent. If you'd like to learn more about SMS marketing, reach out to David on LinkedIn. He's super active there, and check out the report Conversmart put together. I'll put a link up on the Customers Who Click site for everyone. Any other podcast questions or feedback, please send them over to will@customerswhoclick.com. Next up, I've got Jeff Davis on to talk about using video for advertising and how you can make this a channel that really scales fantastically well. But until then, keep those customers clicking.